First of all, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Garrett Peterson. I am one of the principal owners of Yahara Software here in Madison, Wisconsin. Yahara is a company that focuses on providing bespoke software for our customers, and most of our customers are in the transportation or the life sciences industries. One of the things I love about being in the software industry is that it's a constantly changing, constantly evolving landscape, and my role there as Chief Strategic Officer of Yahara really demands of me to understand that landscape, understand our position within the landscape, and look for opportunities to take the new developments and pair them with the talents and the experience that we have, both technological and domain experience at Yahara Software, to address the client problems that are brought forth to us. I'd like to introduce you now to the first one of my co-panelists here today, Amanda Baltz from Spaulding Medical. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Spaulding Medical?
Yes, thank you, Garrett. So Amanda Baltz, CEO of Spaulding Medical. I am a biomedical scientist turned entrepreneur. Back in 2007, Randy Spaulding and a small team of us founded Spaulding Clinical Research. It's in West Bend, and we designed a next-generation phase 1 drug testing facility with an emphasis on cardiac safety. And we grew that, and it's growing still to this day. And along the way, we designed a handheld, portable 12-lead ECG. And we'll talk more about this today, but eventually spun that device and software system out of the parent company and formed Spaulding Medical. And that's the company that I'm running. And today, we are in both the clinical research markets as well as in healthcare systems. And we're evolving that baseline technology into a number of other products over the next several years.
Thank you, Amanda. And Spaulding Medical is a great Wisconsin success story, and thanks for joining us on the panel. Our second panelist, or the second co-panelist rather, today is Nicolas from Gilson. And Nicolas, would you please tell us about Gilson? One of the things I found kind of interesting in speaking with you, since I guess it was in the 1980s when I first started my career working as a lab tech, and even at that time, Gilson was really well established as a provider of pipettes and pipette supplies. But in talking with you, I learned that actually Gilson started in a completely different business. Can you tell us about that and now your new venture into metrology as well?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm Nicolas. I'm the CEO from Gilson. I'm an insider. I've been working in the company for almost 20 years. And you're right. I mean, Gilson seems to be some sort of institution in the world of life science with some products that everybody are using every day. The most renowned product being Pipette Man, the one you mentioned. But yes, talking about pivoting, Gilson has been pivoting business and product pretty frequently over the last 70 years. Gilson is probably one of the early offshoots of UW. Its founder, Dr. Warren Gilson, started to design its own instruments because that was during the Second World War and he was not able to find the instrument on the market. And it turned out to be a company. Being a physiologist, he was very interested in ECGs and brainwaves, so he started to manufacture brainwave detectors. And that went very well till to some extent, some of the Gilson products were used by the CIA as lie detectors. And suddenly he was really creating a lot of technologies and trying to find other applications from technology. And that's how the pipette that everybody is using in a lab today has come from the simple fact of having a technology of a digital miniaturized counter and trying to apply that to some other product. And looking at adapting that technology, digital technology to some product, he found out that one good product to be done was a pipette with adjustable volume. So that's part of the story. There's many more stories about Gilson now, and we'll come back on that. And you'll see it's still focused a lot around that pipette that everybody knows.
Thank you, thank you. And so, as we're talking about pivoting strategies, obviously, if you're going to take your company into the direction of a completely new marketplace or a completely new customer base or a completely new product line, you're taking a leap of faith of one kind or of one type or another. But we certainly don't want to give the impression that somehow this is done, without basis. Within the book Blue Ocean Strategy, and I know in talking with both of my co-panelists, really these strategies really depend on, first of all, identifying some core strength or strengths within your organization, and then basing your strategies on emphasizing that core strength, but now in a new arena. And that is the story I have to tell as well here. As I mentioned before, Yahara Software does work both in the industry of transportation as well as in the industry of life sciences. And in the area of transportation, our transportation team and division has worked really hard over many, many years now to build a system that does the integration of data, of telematics data, electronic data logs, and GPS information, driver safety information, that type of thing, and be able to transmit that information and translate that information between electronic log providers and fleet management systems, those types of things. And we have hundreds of customers that depend on that data every day. It's transmitting tens of thousands, probably closer to hundreds of thousands now, records daily of this nature. So it's a big system, a big architecture that's in place to do that, and those customers depend on that data to first be delivered securely, to be delivered consistently, so that they can use it for optimizing their operations, for improving their driver safety programs, for even for complying to government regulations, for instance. So it's again a big scalable system. In the life sciences arena, we really don't do, or I didn't at that time especially, do a lot of large integration systems. That more of our focus in life sciences was working with companies that were integrating or working on medical instrumentation or laboratory instrumentation, collecting data from the instrument, controlling the instrument, integrating it with LIMS, that type of thing, or building line of business applications to support laboratory workflows, to automate them, that type of thing. So that's the type of work that we primarily did in the life sciences arena. But about 3 years ago, one of our real key partners came to us and said that they had an opportunity to work with a Gates Foundation funded project that was addressing the very real and very disturbing rate of childhood mortality in sub-Saharan African countries. And they were looking at, first of all, before they could really do anything to address the problem, really trying to understand, well, what are the causations of childhood mortality in these countries? And that's a tough problem to solve. And so what they've done is they've collected a panel of pathologists, and they've created a specific customized TACMan array PCR test that they use to collect information. They also collect information from whatever type of medical records that might be available, and it's a varying array of different types of records that are available in these cases. And then also things like photographs and textual accounts and things of that nature. So it's a lot of different information being pulled together and then collated for a panel of pathologists to try to understand what the causations of the mortality were. And so they came to us and explained this problem, and we looked at it and we talked it through company-wide. We really wanted to help and realized that this transportation platform that I had mentioned earlier really had a lot of similarities in terms of the veracity of the information, the need to be able to manage the work queues of the information coming in and validating it before passing it forward, being able to collate information coming from different sources. All of those things were very similar from one situation to the next. Now, of course, the data is very vastly different, but the architecture of the platform that was necessary was really very similar. And so we proposed and indeed did move forward with repurposing this transportation platform for this life sciences purpose. And it was very successful. Within 4 months of signing that contract, we were able to start moving the initial information from those TACMan array cards from the laboratories into the system. And we've been working on that system now for another couple of years since then, constantly improving it, and it now does manage tens of thousands of records. So it's an example of taking that technology, and we really wouldn't even be able to bid on this project had it not been that we had that technology available to us, and we're able to then repurpose it for a completely different need. Nicolas, I know at Gilson you're embarking on a new, as I mentioned earlier, focus on metrology. What are some of the core strengths of Gilson that you're focusing on as you then move into this new arena?
So when you want to focus on new area, you have to start with something, right? You can't decide that you have a technology, a product, and you want to switch it. Often it's a matter of looking at what you are, what you have around you, and start with something. Personally, I always tell to my teams, like, I'm not so brilliant, I can manage one variable, never two. So when it comes to innovation, like, dumb it down to one variable. And it's always like, either you have a technology to start with, or you have a customer base, or you have a business that you're doing. And you start with one of the three, and you can spread out to the other. I was talking about Pipette Man. This is typically something where, okay, we have a wonderful business for 45 years in working with scientists, in the end of every scientist every day at the lab. So we watch them. And watching them, we saw that they are spending as many times with a pipette in their hand as they spend with a pen in their hand, writing down things. And they're writing down what they're doing here. So from the customer and from the product you have, you say, hey, there's something I can do for my customer. And then you work with the customer on understanding what you can do. And one of the outcomes is, instead of having to write down everything, why wouldn't we be able to have the pipette recording what it's doing? And then we start with something. And when you say we embark on a project, yeah, we started with a customer and a product, and we embark in a totally new domain for Gilson, which is managing the information coming back and forth from the product at the bench, and providing metrology data and traceability data. So you create a new business from an existing business. So that's one of the possible thing. And we'll probably talk later about how the difficulty to represent. But observation of what you have in hands is a key factor for success, and one variable.
So using that one variable, and in this case, I think it's really important to point out that a lot of these types of strategies really do come out of also partnerships, and partnerships in this case with customers. And Amanda, I know that partnerships are a really big part of what you attribute your success to as well at Spaulding Medical. What are some of the partnerships that have played a big role in your success?
Sure. So as we were growing in the clinical trials business, we were partnering with a number of pharmaceutical companies, global pharmaceutical companies, who were looking at how do we collect the same level of cardiac information that you're collecting in the building outside of the building? And how do we do it in the automated digital way that we're able to do inside Spaulding Clinical? And at the time, the option was to basically ship out a large tabletop piece of equipment around the world, and that was fine. That worked for many people, but there were a lot of our partners and customers were actually preferring to collect the information via paper, scan, fax, do things very manual, and this just created a huge amount of error rates and poor data integrity. So we basically came, because of those partnerships with customers, and again, looking at, as Nicolas was saying, you're watching and you're listening to the customer problem. That was how we came up with the design for a handheld acquisition device, but leveraging the cloud and mobile technologies to still collect that same level of quality data. And so it was with our customers and those partnerships that we were able to deploy our first batch of this medical device back in 2011. And then over the years, then we saw those same partners providing a lot of market feedback in terms of how this new technology was working for them. So we definitely leveraged our customers and those partnerships as a way to really hone in and design the solution and the product that was really the fit for the market.
So as we started out here, I think we were talking about relying on core strengths of the organizations, whether it be technological or whether it be your customer base or whether it be something else. But something else that I think is a really strong thread is really look towards your partners and look towards the people that you're already working with for not only the inspiration, but really the drive behind some of these changes. Because I think in every case, you're going to find that strong partners really are part of what makes a strong initiative. So moving on, I mean, so we've identified an opportunity for innovation. We've identified what's our source of the inspiration for that innovation, and now we're going to start planning. And so many times I think that there's this idea that now we're going to start planning. We need to really start looking at the resourcing plans, looking at the strategic pacing of your process, just general scheduling of your process.
We were really entering into a very different regulatory space. So the resources and team necessary to manufacture and monitor a medical device and software solution in a global market is very different than the regulatory team and the team needed to run a phase 1 clinical trials business. And so as this was happening, and then as we had our sales and marketing team looking at, well, how are we going to market a product launch into the healthcare space of this handheld solution versus how do we market this or how do we weave it into our phase 1 story, it just started becoming clearer over time that in order for us to focus and grow correctly in our market, in these market segments, that we really needed a separate team, a totally different set of focus, regulatory environment, but also it was a different set of funding requirements. So at the time, the phase 1 business was completely self-reliant, was growing, and the customers were coming back for follow-on trials. And in the medical device and software space, there's a ton of R&D that's needed. Not to mention, there's different strategic partners you need along the way. And when we were going out for different rounds of funding, investors were even asking us, well, what are you? Are you a phase 1 business or are you a medical device and software business? And so we started realizing that we were not just confusing to our customers and internally, but also to our potential funding partners. So we met and reviewed a lot with our advisory board and had a lot of management discussions and some failures along the way. So that lack of focus, being spread too thin, I think at different times created more challenges for our teams. And it was around 2015 that we just started the first phase of separating out the business just simply by we had literally a different team on a floor of our building, not interacting with the other teams in the building, keeping a separate set of financials, looking at what the requirements were to fund the growth of that business, keeping those funding requirements very separate from the phase 1 business. And then as we started gaining traction in the medical device and software space, we met with our board last year and finally decided that it made sense to completely legally and financially separate the business as of January 1st of this year. And the hypothesis has so far proven to be correct. So as of January 1st, it wasn't like there was this huge monumental change, but the way in which we've been able to operate, get funding for our growth, but also really position ourselves in front of our customers has just become much crisper and cleaner. The other thing I'll note is that we found there was kind of a tipping point last year where we had a customer who was doing a lot of business with us in the phase 1 space, also in phase 3, But then they were saying, hey, we'd like to do some post-market surveillance with your equipment. And initially we always thought, well, anything that's related to clinical research should stay with the phase 1 with Spaulding Clinical. But when the customer said, no, we need your device and your software to collect the cardiac information all the way through to post-market surveillance, that's when we knew that the customer was going to dictate where that business line was going to go. And that was a huge, that was another big turning point where we said, aha, we can't be confusing our customers. So that clinical research element of the business did come along, and by being able to focus on the device and the software as a key component to the services we're providing in clinical research, again, we've seen a nice boon in that business, and I think it's because of that focus. So I think, throughout the process, it was a long time, but a lot of it was dictated by market indicators as well as focus.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of this as we look at these strategies, is that you really do have to. It's tempting, I think, in every case to identify a new market strategy and then work within your current organization and you should leverage your current organization's strengths and operational efficiencies and whatnot. But it's also really important to have a specific focus that you perhaps dedicate whole parts of your organization and split out to, or at least dedicate the efforts of individuals to solely that focus to really get these things off the ground. Absolutely. We found the same thing at Yahara Software in terms of, in fact, that's why we do have separate divisions for transportation and life sciences. There is some resource sharing across the two, but very definitely there's a director in transportation, for instance, who is an expert in that area, and that's not me, by the way, as well as our focus in life sciences. Nicolas, so this is a similar challenge that you have at Gilson. As you mentioned, Gilson's been around for a long time. It's interesting. I think I've been doing business with Gilson for almost as long as I've been in Madison, one way or another. It's a very venerable company that has a lot of things that you do very, very well. Mm-hmm. And then as you embark on new products, how do you segregate or separate out these new initiatives from your internal workings that are working so well?
The key, Amanda said it really right, is like at first you need to set a goal, or whether you find you're pivoting by chance or it's the fruit of a more thorough strategic planning, you need to set your own goals for the future. You can't just get something and see like short term where it's going to take you. You still need to drive your organization to some point, especially if you're a smaller organization, which you have something in your hand and you have an opportunity to switch from here to there, etc. You can put your organization at risk if you are not planning for the long term. The second thing is, I really agree, is focus. Don't try to do everything. We all know that when we find something interesting, we have all in the back of our hand, like that world domination plan where we're going to have such a big market share for everything, etc. That's good, but for that to happen, you need to find the killing feature, the killing application. So it takes a lot of focus and dedication around that project. And that focus and dedication goes a lot around, at least for Gilson, for anything that we do, we do minimum viable product and test loops. We test a lot. We are not going to take just something on paper, the theory. We want the product to be in front of the customer. We want the customer to live with the product and give us a feedback so that we can improve things. So it's a long process. It's probably a bit more costly at the start, but it makes the failure, because there are failures, less costly usually. And this is also something you need to allow yourself for the right to fail. And if you want to allow yourself for the right to fail, then you need to separate and segregate activities. You have a business running, and even if you see the pivoting for your own business in the future, don't put that in danger by sucking up all the resources of your company on that marvelous new world domination thing. Segregate it. Dedicate a few resources And the last thing that you come up with is very interesting, is don't go there alone, partner. If I take the idea of putting a smart button on top of the pipette, oh, that Gilson can do. But then all of the setup of cloud environment and all the software solution and data and data science, et cetera, it's kind of foreign for a company like Gilson. So you need some technical backup. You need some technical partnership, which you are part of, because you can't do everything yourself. So either it's financial, technical, or even marketing partnership. We have a lot of company, and we have turned that into a system at Gilson where we are collaborating with smaller company to take their technology, to make them industrial and bring them to the market. So we are a partner, but we also know that as a company, we need partners as well to get what we need. So that thing about setting goals, testing and focusing and partnering is really key for the success of anything, I guess.
I very much agree. And one last point, I think that, it's often forgotten, in strategic planning, the fun part is to decide what it is you're going to do. But really, it's a little less fun, but equally important to also decide what you're not going to be doing. You can't just work 80 hours and make something like this succeed. You're going to have to decide what it is that you're not going to use those resources for instance. And so that's a big part of when, I love the idea of actually dedicating the whole organization to one floor and saying that those folks are no longer going to be working for this part of our organization, they're going to be focused on this new area. And being able to make those parts of those decisions is also a really important part of moving forward with a strategy like this. And so let's get into that then. Let's get into the point now. We've done the planning, we've identified the opportunity, we've come up with a strategic plan, we've built a whole new organization to address the problem, and now we're in the midst of implementing a blue ocean strategy like this. And the rubber really hits the road, and as Nicolas, as you said, there's going to be always, of course, a lot of surprises, a lot of things that you need to make adjustments for. And I know that you had mentioned that one of the key parts you mentioned earlier, one of the key parts of establishing your strategy is understanding what those key performance metrics that you're going to do are, and what you're going to do as you assess your situation in situ, so to speak. So could you tell us a little bit about your metrics at Gilson as you move into
goals? You never know. Well, frankly, with that kind of new technologies and pivoting, it's totally not objective because you never arrived. On the way, you are going to set up a lot of KPIs, privilege like short-term value KPIs on the efficiency of your tests. Because on the way to get to your solution, and Amanda, you've seen that you come up with something, and it's going to be turning into something else. So those KPIs need to be to allow you to say, okay, for that part of the test, I've reached my goals, and the metrics are showing that I've reached my goal. But along the way, I found that other opportunity that I'm going to, okay, it is going to change the design of the product. We need to re-engineer it, et cetera, et cetera. So like short loops, and monitoring the short loops instead of the long goal. I mean, the long goal is, am I reaching my goals, or have my goals changed over the course of the test and the evolution? So this is very important, I guess. And for instance, for the connected pipettes that we are developing now, yes, of course, the long-term goal would be ideally to have every single pipette man in the whole world, and there are millions of them, retrofitted with that funny button on the top so that everybody can do that. That's good. So that's the long, but then you have to start with phases. You want to start out with probably starting to have that on a new product, and then have a campaign to come back on your old product, because as Amanda said, like, oh, we had to redesign the product at some point. That good old pipette man that everybody knows, that has been designed for years, is never meant to be designed to be an IoT product. So you have to learn and to separate your project in chunks and pieces to be successful. So it's always, those KPIs need to support very much short-term goals, and the long, but you keep your long-term direction in mind anyway.
Yeah, and that's, I think KPIs, provide, as you said, sort of a roadmap for the success and being able to measure and know where you are in that roadmap. But you do have to, as you see your own metrics perhaps not meeting what you'd expected, or when you in the middle of it realize that there's really a different set of metrics that need to be addressed, being able to identify those and move forward with that information is
And really much depending on your goals. If your goal is like at Gilson to have a commercial grade product, etc., you're going to go through the technology maturity KPIs before getting into the product and industrial development metrics. So it's a lot of different steps. If your goal is to come up with something and then sell your company, you're going to use other metrics. So it's really much linked to your goal and how you will evaluate and success.
And Amanda, I can't imagine, I mean, going from clinical research into the world of medical device manufacturing, obviously I'm sure there was a lot that you learned along the way. What were some of the things that sort of surprised your team, and what about your preparation really helped you to move past the experience of those surprises?
Sure. So I think for us, it was the key time point was early adoption, right? So we had to basically leverage some of the partnerships that we had to run some beta testing, some piloting. We had a lot of hypotheses about what the product could do in the healthcare market, but they were insular. We hadn't tested it yet in the market. So running a series of betas in the real clinical environments where we thought we could have impact were huge in terms of understanding where our key areas of focus should be for the product. We also discovered barriers to entry that we hadn't considered before that would impact the time for adoption. So, we would kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how are we going to address these barriers to entry? And then there we would be, designing a solution that we hadn't anticipated. But I think that having the product mostly, so we'd say it would 80% baked, but that 20% of it was really based on what was coming from the healthcare market was pivotal in terms of really getting it right for a new market. But having the core product as a high quality, strong basis was very important. But then really it was those betas that I think were huge for us.
Being able to take that information and pivot almost immediately based on feedback from the marketplace.
Absolutely, and to fail fast and to know very quickly, you know what, this is not what we thought it was going to be. We need to readjust and kind of, leave that market opportunity behind. There's this classic chasing waterfalls that you can, very quickly get yourself wrapped up into, and we had to be really disciplined to not do that and to recognize that it just wasn't, the sales cycle or the process. The customer acquisition cost was going to be too high for us to keep going down a certain market channel. So there's so many different ways that you can bring a product to market in healthcare, and we just had to be very disciplined about failing fast in some of them and then really defining where our success would be.
Stick to it. It's interesting, both of you have mentioned this concept of failing fast, and I think this is true in any business endeavor, is being able to understand how to fail fast, take the information from that failure and again pivot. But I think it's kind of telling that for these types of initiatives, that's probably even multiplied in terms of importance. The other thing that I found, in fact, I was just complaining to Abby, my co-worker here the other day, that over the many years that I guess I've been trying to implement strategic initiatives of one kind or another, the one thing that constantly comes back and bites me in the butt is how much longer things take to do than what I expected them to. And I think especially in the case of going into a new marketplace, that just turns out to be true. These surprises, they cost you money sometimes for sure, but a lot of times the real cost, at least in my opinion, is the time it takes to overcome them. And anything you can do to address that, I think, is going to help you succeed. And so I think moving on here then to the end part, and we are going to have plenty of time for questions, so that's good. But the last thing we want to sort of pay homage to is the fact that in these types of business initiatives and in any other really, you have to be able to say that serendipity plays a part in our success, and I think we're all grateful for the serendipity that has come into being. Certainly, had it not been for that partner that knew of our work and happened to know a little bit about our integration experience in transportation, we never would have had the opportunity to even speak with the Gates Foundation, for instance. Amanda, do you have any examples where serendipity has played a role in your success thus far?
Yes, absolutely. So our founder, Randy Spaulding, had spent 25 plus years building cardiac technology for Marquette Electronics and then GE. And so really it was late last year that we got a phone call from a really large health system that was trying to solve a global cardiac problem throughout their entire hospital system. And somebody happened to know that Randy was an innovator in the cardiac safety space. And so they called us. And it's kind of that moment that you're always waiting for. I mean, you're constantly calling and reaching out to different people, but it was really this moment where they just, somebody knew Randy and they just so happened to know how to get a hold of us, and they called us, and that was the beginning of a beautiful discussion that is now the basis of our entire roadmap. It was a vision that we always had, but we were waiting for the market to be right. So when the market actually called on us and said it's time, that felt a lot like serendipity, and that's where we're really gunning our focus now, and it's been really fun. But that's to say, this was 2017. The product had been first dreamt up in 2009. So of all the times we have talked about the overall product vision and what we wanted to do with the product, it took us that long until the market said, "Hey, we heard that you guys are innovating in this space. We love it, and it's time."
Mm-hmm. So anyway, with that, we'll conclude this panel discussion. But really, what we wanted to do, and we do have plenty of time left aside to take questions from the audience. I think there is a microphone if we need it. It's a small room. If you'd like to just yell out the question, I think that'll work as well.
This is for Amanda. With your company, do you see a market for kind of co-monitoring blood pressures, or partnering with people? Because one side of the equation is your electronic rhythm of your heart, and the other is what the peripheral vascular. I don't know if that's an area that you've looked into.
It is. And it's in design right now. I mean, we're basically looking at collecting pretty much any kind of monitoring parameter that you would typically have in the hospital, kind of all flowing through our platform, which then collects a lot of different levels of cardiac data on the patient. And then depending upon, the setting, if they're at home, if they're, being monitored in the hospital, you can collect whatever piece of data you want, but definitely blood pressure, overall vital signs are definitely part of the roadmap in terms of integrating all of those collection points.
Question way in the back.
I wondered if both of you could comment on any formal tools or processes that you use in developing your vision, strategy, and ultimately deploying that in your organizations.
We could cite like 20 or 30 different tools. I mean, there's everywhere to be found. The key is to find the one that will fit your way of thinking and the ability of your organization, I guess, right? You have a lot of very, very heavy process-oriented methodologies, which, for instance, for a company like Gilson, don't make really sense because we don't have enough people to just draw those methods. So we making more strives on very simple methods where, for instance, everything needs to have its own business case. So we run a business model framework for the whole strategy that has 9 different base, from customers to resources to revenue stream, etc., etc. And we have a systematic approach when we have a project of what it is going to impact in every of those 9 boxes. But I guess every company can have its own way of thinking, and it's important to adapt that to your resources, I think. No?
Yeah, we've used a number. I would say what's been the most beneficial or efficient for us is to hole away in a room, quarterly or annually with key people on the team, and to just do a massive strategy session, your typical SWOT analysis, and really look at what types of hypotheses you've been running in terms of what's been going on in the market. But just hole away, no interruptions. And then coming out of the session, having a list of action items and some timelines associated. When you're a small team, it's hard to get, formal systems around it. So what we've just found to be the most efficient is to have the breakaway strategic sessions as needed.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. I'm somewhat of a strategy geek. I read all the books and whatnot, and certainly, I think you see in almost any business strategy, things like Porter's 5 forces and using models like that. But really, you need to identify what aspects of these models or these processes that really are going to work for your team, and then adapt them for your team in that situation. Especially in a small business, but I think this is really true even in larger businesses. These initiatives usually start in a small core, and that small core really does have to almost establish their own process. But you certainly can use other models. I think it's important, though, to be careful to make sure that the model itself and pursuing the model itself doesn't become a risk to your success. You need to be able to be flexible enough to see what's happening and have your team be able to interact effectively as well. Other questions? Yes.
I'm just got a question about failure. So you talked about failing early, and you yourself talked about things taking longer than you think they should. So how do you differentiate something taking longer than it should versus we got to kill this because it's now a waste of our resources?
That's an excellent question. I guess I'm going to see if one of you might have an answer to that.
We all have experience on that.
I think you can probably see from this reaction. I don't think there's a great answer to that question. I think it's very likely that as entrepreneurs, we look at the world a bit through rose-colored glasses, and we need to. There's really no other way to, if we were depressive types, I really think it would be difficult to be an entrepreneur in the first place. But that very strength is a weakness in the exact scenario that you're talking about. Is knowing when to fish and when to cut bait, so to speak, is a real challenge. I think there's a few things that you can use as guideposts, though, and I'll admit to failure in being able to do this consistently, but at least this is what I try to do, is first of all, have a real strong network of outside advisors, whether it be our board, whether it be co-workers that are very vested and understand the situation, whether it be, I'm really blessed to have 6 brothers and sisters, all of whom we're very close, and all of whom are entrepreneurs of one kind or another as well, and I can kind of bounce thoughts and ideas off from them. So getting that outside perspective, is one real key way of doing that, because I think internally you're going to want to hold on. Especially if it was your idea, or the genesis was your idea, you're going to want to hold on, and being able to understand or hear rather perspectives from others, hopefully gives you that context from which to make that decision. I think that's one way. Another way, you know, and again, I wish I could say that I was disciplined enough to really do this consistently, but I wish that I would, you know, I think we are consistent about being able to create metrics. We're consistent about measuring those metrics. What you need to do is also define stop gaps, at which point you're going to say those metrics, you know, at that point we're going to say it's not working, or we're going to instantiate a contingency plan. And I think that, you know, deciding that ahead of time in the context of planning rather than the context of the war room, so to speak, I think can be real helpful in that regard. But it's a really, really difficult decision. I certainly don't want to tell you that I'm...
And just to illustrate that, so all the thing about the connected pipette, etc., was initially expressed in a strategic planning dated 2007 at Gilson. It's almost 10 years after, and we're just getting to the implementation. And it's been there forever. And part of being an entrepreneur is at some point you hold on to your ideas, but you need to have exactly what you said, sufficient awareness to say if that idea is still worth exploring and developing, or is there many factors around that says like that's never going to do it. So that's that like paradigm in between a resilient entrepreneur and some of your things are going to happen maybe in a decade versus like being stubborn and trying to get in something that is never going to give anything.
One other piece of advice I guess I would give, and then we'll get to the next question. And this is, I know, a real ephemeral thought, but if it's no longer fun, I think you should question whether you should keep doing it.
I agree.
I think, again, you know, I'm a relatively stubborn person, and I'll fight through things that, you know, in retrospect, I'll look back and say, that wasn't fun 2 years ago. Why did I keep doing it? I think I knew internally it wasn't going to work at that point. So that's maybe another way to look at it. Yes, another question.
Nicolas, as you're looking at, you mentioned working with partners, you know, every time you look outside what you know, your technology and your customer base, and you say, I have a hunch that this might work. How do you make decisions when to bring in partners, and what are the benefits and what are the pitfalls you have to watch out for in bringing partners in to help you?
The first thing is to introspect yourself. You need to know your own company, and you need to know the capability system of your company. You will always have people trying to say like, oh, we can do that, we can rock this, it's not too far. It's just like two steps to go to etc. No, you need to understand your capability system and stand by your capability system. Then, when it comes to partners, it's all a matter of setting expectations to partners, right? What are you expecting from partners to be able to express that clearly? Because it's not only having somebody who's going to develop a software for us, for instance, somebody who's going to finance such project. We're talking about partnership here, where we embark with a partner in a joint success or failure, right? So that's very important. And third, the profile of the partner is very important. You choose partners as you would choose your employees, because you are going to embark on a sometimes 10-year long or 15-year young project with them. So it's important that you are being able to work together on some sort of equality level and not having too much grasp on a partner, or not having the partner having too much power on you. So all those are elements where that makes sense when you choose your partner. And obviously, they need to add to your capability system. They need to bring you the competencies, the skills, or the knowledge, or the ability to do things that, when mixed with your own capability systems, are going to generate the value proposition, the unique value proposition for customers.
Yes.
As you were telling your stories, I noticed like elements of system thinking. You're looking at this problem, then you take a step back, and then you see the entirety of the solution. Can you elaborate a little bit about how this helps you, and if you have used any system thinking processes, not tools, that help you, advance and, discover the next problem?
I can describe the system that we're using at Gilson. So remember, we had three things. So we have technology, we have market, more or less, and we have customers. we have a system for technology, right? So we have a team of an innovation team that is in charge to look for technology. So it's look for technology and that are going to match the long-term direction of the company. If the company wants to do such or such thing, the system, the innovation system is going to go and get technologies, right? On the other hand, they're also here to explore that the technology that we have, what else can we do with it? So that's their role. It's very much technology. And their system is all about co-development with customers, with universities, with other partners. We also have that investment fund that we keep in the company to partners with technology companies. On the market side, we obviously, like many companies, we have our portfolio managers, our application managers, all the people in touch with the market, their application, and trying to match our product to their application, and can sometimes see different paths for that. Well, one of the most recent examples is that we have a good technology, chromatographic purification technology that is used in a lot of different natural products. And one day, some of the application manager came like, oh, there's a growing market in the cannabinoid purification. Well, so let's try that. Short loops, try blah, blah, blah. It happens that it has become one of the fastest growing market over the past 2 or 3 years. So that was just the people working with the customer here. And last but not least, we also have a process of strategic customers, strategic, with which we are developing applications. People like the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation and Biohealth in the Bay Area, which we have a partner, which we partner with to develop all that connected environment on the bench.